All right. There's this idea of a parent function. I want to make sure we go over that. It's not going to be a lot, but just want to make sure we're good. We already talked about the idea of this thing called a function. That's function notation. You'll see sooner than later in one of the subsequent videos that we'll be dealing with sketching functions that look something like this. For example, this is in vertex form, just a form of this type of function. Whenever you see this squared item dealing with a function, that's called a quadratic function. We will do a lot of work with quadratic functions later. Right now, we're just going to use them for like quick graphing and translating. All right, quadratic functions, whenever there's a 2 there. So this is an example of a quadratic function, and it has a couple of things going on. It happens to be in vertex form. There are other forms, but this happens to be in vertex form. That just means that all this extra stuff is telling you where to move the vertex. The most simple form, the most simple way to use or show any quadratic function would be if your function looked like this. You see how you have all this stuff in the parentheses, like this +2 inside of the parentheses, and then all of that is being squared? Well, if you didn't have all of that and just had x squared, so no plus or no minus in there, and then you see how in addition to that we subtracted 5 from both sides? What if I added 0 or subtracted 0 so that I had nothing on here except for this x squared? If I had this most basic form of a quadratic formula, we call that thing the parent function. The most basic form of a quadratic, for example, is called the parent function of a quadratic. All right, it's the parent form of a quadratic. Now, there are parent forms for every type of function. There are some really generic ones, or I should say some specific ones that you'll deal with as you go through math, like things that are raised to the first power. Like if I say things like, if my function is like 2x, you see how it's raised to the first power, even though we don't write that 1 there, it's raised to the first power. Any function raised to the first power is called a linear function. Any function raised to the second power, and again, I'm going to look at the most basic form, we know that's a quadratic. You can have functions that are raised to all kinds of powers, and they have special things that go on with it. That's called a cubic. Not that that matters. We're not going to really deal with cubics much. I just wanted to show you. But even when it's not just simply that, there are things, and we've seen this before, there are functions that look like this, that involve the absolute value, right? And you might add some number here. So you might see like x plus 2, and then add 3 to that. Now that's an absolute function value. The most basic form of that, or the parent function of the absolute value, is, as you might imagine, just the x. So this is called the parent function for an absolute value. This is the parent function for the absolute value function. All right. So the parent function is really just the most basic function you can get. Let me scroll back up here because every quadratic has the same shape. It's called a parabola. It looks like this. And in fact, the parent function, the one that I really want you to notice, has a vertex, is what you call it here, at the bottom, and it looks like this, looks like a U. So the parent function for a quadratic looks like a U, where the vertex, this point right here, that thing is called a vertex, it's sitting at 0, 0. The parent function of an absolute value also has a vertex at 0, 0. But the shape of it, so your vertex is there, the shape is not a U, it's a V. All right, so we're going to need that information as we go forth. There are other types of functions, but these are the two that we're really going to focus on. But the same ideas apply. We're going to do things to these types of basic functions, like I might even have a negative out here, or I could have a negative out here. And I need you to be able to sketch this thing based on that. That's in another video. All right.